Test Drive Unlimited is back like new labour, having been exhumed from the 360 era and given a fresh coat of current-gen paint, inviting players to experience a life of automotive opulence on the rain-slick, neon-lit streets of Hong Kong, or a one-to-one recreation thereof. Supercars, luxury apartments that look like the bridge of the Enterprise, the servers constantly playing up. It truly is the mid-2000s all over again. But are we talking boom or bust? Test Drive Unlimited came out in 2006 and it felt like a bit of a revelation. It wasn't the first open world racer by any means, but it was one that massively popularised the idea and set the template for the genre going forward. Ooh. Playing it now is a real time capsule. It's a driving game through and through, and it doesn't feel the need to bombard you with notifications for tasks, playlists and other nearby side missions. No, it just gives you access to 1,000 miles of Hawaiian tarmac and the means to enjoy them. And now that the open world racer has become the dominant form of the driving game, you can see its DNA strewn all over the place, just like what I've done with this Audi TT. And though the genre has gone through a process of expansion and frankly enshittification, and adopted wholesale the trope of an impossibly ultra-budget motoring festival, your The Cruise, your Forza Horizons, even your later Need for Speeds all owe a great deal to this. Test Drive Unlimited has an undeniable heritage then, and I feel like putting Solar Crown in the title of this one is a very deliberate choice to make people think of it as a returning king, and inspire people like me to say things like, the daddy of the open world racing genre is back to reclaim its throne, or words to that effect. So does it? Is it? Well, Firstly, the good. The map is incredible and it is enormous. If you've played Sleeping Dogs, you will be familiar with an open world driving experience set on the island of Hong Kong, or if you live in Hong Kong and have a car. But this really does take it to a whole new level. The tutorial is set on Aberdeen Island, which honestly is big enough that it feels like a complete game could be set here. And then after doing some qualifying races in a big Lambo, which is an odd choice for a starter car, you're whisked away in a weird sort of drone helicopter thing to the main island of Hong Kong, deposited into a penthouse suite in the Solar Crown Hotel, which is, we're told, the tallest building in Hong Kong that has been made specifically for this motoring festival.
It is the highest building in Hong Kong and was built specially for the competition.
Who's financing this? I like to think it's some kind of meta joke about how absurd these motor festivals are in games like this, where you have a sort of Isle of Man situation going on where there's a motorsport event that takes over an entire landmass where people actually live. And you think, nobody's that into motorsport, surely. So that's fun. And what's also fun is the semi-automatic gearbox setting, which is on by default. What that means is that the game handles the gearing for you, but it also lets you manually shift up and down if you feel the need to. And that's a genuinely good system. It really squares the circle of trying to do sort of proper drivey driving while you're using a controller. So that's a good choice. What's also a good choice is that the game is tweaked to make power sliding relatively easy to pull off and very fun. The driving model is sophisticated enough that this feels different in every car, but it means that even the cars with a much slower top speed, like the Abarth 500 for example, remain incredibly fun to drive. Throwing that thing around corners in the middle of Hong Kong is honestly the most fun that this game will give you, outside of some collectible wrecks that are dotted across the island, which you are able to locate with a handy radar ping that engages whenever you're near one. Again, another good choice, because as well as expanding your classic car library, it also encourages you to explore every nook and cranny of this vast map. So, semi-automatic gearbox, good map, power sliding in a Super Mini. That's about it, really. No, that is it. The rest, unfortunately, is abysmal. The server issues, for example, have been an absolute nightmare. This is an always online game. It doesn't matter whether or not you're actually playing with other people, it requires an active internet connection, and the servers are just constantly dropping out and having issues where it'll just throw you out of a race right in the middle of a race really consistently. it's very difficult to actually make any progress in the game at the moment, and that has been the case pretty much since the start of the review period. And that's annoying for us, because we generally don't get that long to review these things, and an entire day was taken up by the servers being down for maintenance, and then our progress was wiped. I've spoken to other people reviewing it, and they've been able to get races completed, but only if they log in at like 6 or 7 AM, which is... I'm not doing that. Who's alive at that time? But this isn't just something that's affecting reviewers, it's also bad for you. This is something that's affecting people who've paid for premium editions of the game in order to have early access. Early access that's been completely wiped out by these launch issues. So if you've paid an eye-watering 70 quid for the silver edition or a sphincter-clenching 80 quid for the gold edition, you've been shafted. But you could argue that all online games with a massively multiplayer component have server issues when they launch. That doesn't make it okay, but it's probably something that'll work itself out. Surely there's a good game underneath all that when it works, right? No, because when it works, it's bang average, and you've played it before, but better. There's a panoply of open world driving games that you can play instead. All the good stuff that you'll find in Solar Crown is mostly boilerplate stuff that you'll find in every other game of its type, and usually in projects that have obviously been put together with much bigger budgets, roping in much better expertise. Expertise like, for example, optimization. The PS5 version of Solar Crown runs absolutely terribly, even in performance mode, which is laughably touted as running at 60 FPS and often dips during races, absolutely murdering any sense of speed, which, I'm sure I don't need to tell you, is pretty much the death rattle for any kind of racing game. And it generally just looks nasty. It's got this sort of N64 Vaseline smear thing going on that really hampers the art direction, such as it is. I mean, I know it's meant to be Hong Kong, but the vibe is more sort of Milton Keynes. Expertise like voice acting direction that doesn't make your girl boss CEO character sound more like a speak and spell than the in-game sat-nav. And just as an aside, I'm sorry, but what is she wearing?
As for me, I must leave you for the time being, but I imagine we'll have the pleasure of speaking again.
Is this business casual as designed by a horny 14-year-old boy? Like, come on, man. So, as a 360 throwback, Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown is a crushing disappointment. Franchise revivals like this utterly fail if they make you pine for better times. I'm trying to make out that the original's better than this one, and here I am, stuck in a bit of scenery. Franchise revivals like this utterly fail if they make you pine for better times instead of giving you something new that reminds you why you loved the original in the first place. To see that distinction in action, we need only look at Space Marine 2. Which is its own kind of motorfest, a rip-roaring kaleidoscope of death that pits you and two of your pals, if you've got any, against a multi-planet Tyranid invasion. See the sights, enjoy the amenities of our fully featured battle barge, meet the friendly locals and admire the grotesquely proportioned Gothic architecture of our futuristic space Catholicism. Space Marine's entire mission is to make you, yes you with your girly arms and your mortgage, feel like a gigantic man. And boy, does it ever. You are a genetically engineered instrument of death, twice the height and 4 times the bulk of every other person you meet, meaning this is a power fantasy that revels in its own over-the-top absurdity, and that is the 360 era of shooters in a nutshell. And it feels good to play. The presentation is flawless, the shooting is crunchy and satisfying, the AI companions aren't thick as pig shit, meaning that it's just as fun in solo as it is in co-op. It's one of the best 7 out of 10s of all time, sequelizing one of the best 7 out of 10s of all time. The original Space Marine was often compared, and quite ferociously, to that most definitive of 360 shooters, Gears of War. There is, of course, a bit of a chicken and egg situation about who inspired who here. Warhammer 40,000 predates Gears of War, which it directly inspired, by almost 20 years, and Gears of War clearly set the template followed by the original Space Marine. I mean, fundamentally, they're both about a big guy cutting about killing aliens with a chainsaw and a gun. Or a chainsaw gun, but the principle's the same. In both cases, there's a lot of rich, wider lore that you don't have to give a toss about. Space Marine 2 isn't really concerned with whether or not you understand where it sits in the 40k timeline, or whether you know what Adeptus Mechanicus means. I mean, in context of 40k, I don't mean like in Latin. It's not even vaguely concerned with high-minded things like your immersion. There are loads of invisible walls here that they don't even try to hide, and even if you're completely out of ammo, Titus always magically has bullets in the chamber to pull off execution moves, but that doesn't matter because it's cool. If you consider how you can draw a straight line from the Warhammer 40k aesthetic and general vibe to so many of the absurdly macho third-person shooters of the 360 era and beyond, it's hard not to conclude that Warhammer is the basis of the entire genre. The foundation myth, the Old Testament, the stone tablets atop Mount Sinai of a type of game that was so important to the 360/PS3 era and arguably defines it more than any other type of game. And the crucial thing about Space Marine 2 is that it's the best kind of throwback because it continues the story, does a lot of new stuff, but it looks and feels exactly how you remember the original Space Marine looked and felt, but didn't because the past was rubbish and our minds play tricks on us. Space Marine 2 evokes the original experience and betters it in a lot of ways, often simply thanks to the fact that we're in the future now. Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown is the opposite of Space Marine 2. It's the worst kind of throwback because it is on so many levels a worse experience than the original. It's nowhere near as good, it doesn't even look that much better and performs arguably worse. And it's been bettered so many times over by its rivals in the space that it is now the pretender, the would-be usurper, the fallen king with no crown to speak of. And it's a real shame because despite all that I've said today, nothing that has come along to fill the Test Drive Unlimited void in the intervening years has ever quite had the same vibe, the same attitude, the same wit. And you can clearly see this if you compare the openings. The first TDU has this iconic intro where the character select screen is a queue of people in an airport who can't find their boarding passes, and whichever character you pick out of this random bunch of people gets, via your divine providence, to skip in front of the queue and look really smug about it in the process. It tells you something about the world, it tells you something about the character you're playing. You're a chancer, you're a wheeler-dealer, you're a risk-taker. Of course you're the sort of person who's able to earn a considerable income by throwing the back end of an Audi TT around downtown Waikiki, the sort of income stream that a normal person just wouldn't even consider. TDU 2 has you choosing an avatar from awkward dancing guests at a party, which works because the game is set in Ibiza, the party island. I mean, it's a lot less clever, but it's still unique and interesting. Solar Crown's equivalent is just this. A normal ass character select screen with all the design ethos of a Dyson Airblade. And that is the game. Even if all the technical issues were sorted out and the servers were fixed, it would still be a normal ass game that's about as exciting as a service station hand dryer. Everything about it has been done better elsewhere. If you want to throw supercars around convincing facsimiles of real-world locations, you can just play any one of the Forza Horizon games. If you want a cool driving plus life sim experience set on the island of Hong Kong, you can play Sleeping Dogs, which doesn't have the benefit of licensed cars, and the map is a much more cartoony Grand Theft Auto style version of the real location, but Christ, you're gonna have a lot more fun. If you want to play something that is specifically a modern take on Test Drive Unlimited, you can play The Crew Motorfest, which is an open world racing game set in the original location and made by much of the original team. Or just play the original Test Drive Unlimited like I've been doing rather distractingly throughout this entire video. Despite the fact that the servers were shut down long ago, it still runs perfectly fine in solo mode on the original hardware, and you can get it now for like £3 at a World of Books or whatever. There's just no good reason for Solar Crown to exist, and there's definitely no good reason for you to spend your hard-earned money on it. And that's honestly the last thing I expected or wanted to say about Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown, because it's been 13 years since the series' last outing, and frankly, the fans that have been waiting for it to come back for so long deserve better. Forza Horizon and the crew deserve to be challenged in this space, but guys, this ain't it.